All right, so it looks like we are live on Facebook. Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us tonight for a live stream event with special guest, the Minnesota Disability Law Center. My name is Panu. I'm an admin of SAWV and will be moderating tonight's live stream event. For those that are learning about SAWV for the first time, we are a Facebook community group that launched in November 2019. We have over 500 members from different states and connections to disability. Our mission in SAWV is to, one, support the empowerment of individuals with disabilities and their families, and two, promote awareness and acceptance of disabilities in the Hmong community. SAWV is an acronym that translates to Rise in Hmong and stands for Supporting All Abilities, Welcoming All Voices. SAWV welcomes everyone. SAWV members have opportunities to learn about disabilities in the Hmong community, share their stories, share their knowledge, and learn how to be an ally. The vision for SAWV is to raise awareness about disability and continue having conversations about the importance of the disability identity in the Hmong community. For far too long, the topic has been ignored and overlooked. This in turn has continued to harm and create barriers to members in the Hmong community with disabilities. Disability is important and we need to talk about it. SAWV is thankful for each and every one of our members who have joined our group and also believe in advancing our mission and vision with us together. You may find us on YouTube and on Facebook by searching SAWV if you'd like to join and learn more. The purpose of this live stream event is for SAWV and viewers to learn about the Minnesota Disability Law Center and their work, with the focus on their transition services resources. You'll hear more about their transition services work when they share about their Into Adulthood, Your Guide to Disability Access resource. Transition services was the topic that many SAWV members expressed interest in wanting to learn more about. We hope viewers will
We are unable to hear you. Panu.
Yes. This live stream is shareable and anyone can share it onto their Facebook page. So please do share with your friends and family. Oh, sorry. There were some issues with my volume. I apologize for that. But as I was saying that we'd just like to encourage folks to put questions and comments in the Facebook comment section as they come up for you. And that we do have closed captioning enabled in this live stream. There's also ASL interpreters. This live stream is shareable, so anyone can share it onto their Facebook page. So please do so with your friends and family. It'll also be available too for viewing on SAWV for folks who are unable to attend with us live. And so just thanks again for tuning in. And now I'll turn it over to our special guest from the Minnesota Disability Law Center.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Mize. I am a staff attorney with the Minnesota Disability Law Center. I also work on our legal aid side in our youth law project, working with homeless youth. So I do a lot of different things, but today we're here to talk a little bit more about what the Disability Law Center does and also introduce you to our project into adulthood and the guide that we've created that hopefully can be of some use to you and your families. I am going to start just by giving a brief overview of what the Disability Law Center does and introduce our project. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Bo, and they will go a little more in detail into our actual guide that we're excited to present to you all today. For anyone who's not familiar, the Disability Law Center is the designated protection and advocacy agency for vulnerable adults and people with disabilities in Minnesota. We are part of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, but we are also separate from it. And that means we sorry, give me 1 second. My computer is doing something a little weird at the moment. I'm trying. Okay, sorry, can you hear me still? Okay, so we're part of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, but we are also our own separate entity. We provide free legal services for folks with disability-related legal problems, and we are able to work throughout the whole state of Minnesota. We do case advocacy, policy advocacy. We monitor different facilities that serve people with disabilities, and that could be group homes, it could be schools, correctional facilities, really anywhere that serves folks with disabilities. We monitor and check in to make sure things are going okay. We do have some limitations based on case priorities, staffing limitations, grant requirements, things like that. So unfortunately, we're not able to help everyone who contacts us, but we do try to address those issues the best we can. We are different from other advocacy organizations because we provide free legal assistance for disability-related issues, and there are no income requirements when it comes to disability-related issues. Our staff are both attorneys and advocates, so not every problem that someone with a disability has requires an attorney. We have a team of extremely knowledgeable and talented advocates that are able to work and help people solve their issues also. Like I mentioned before, we are able to work statewide. We don't have geographical limitations. We're not limited to the metro area. So that's also nice. And we have offices in Duluth, Fertile, and Mankato. Some of the services we're able to provide are information, education, just to help you understand what your rights are, advice on how to advocate for yourself. We try to create various written material for folks, referrals if we're not able to help. And then when we are able to help, we investigate your case. We might be able to negotiate with the other side. We might be able to represent you in court or admin hearings. Some of the things, if you are having disability-related issues that you might want to contact us for, are if you are denied access to any type of government building or public building, community programs and services, if you feel like you are not being allowed to fully participate in the community, if you think your legal rights are not being respected, for instance, if your employer or your service provider isn't paying you fairly, if you don't feel like you're getting the support you need to live independently, if you're not getting help changing your guardian, or if you just have questions about your legal rights related to your disability. We also are able to provide services if you're denied county-based services, including waiver, employment services, PCA, case management, transportation. We do a lot of work with special education. So if you're having IEP issues or issues with like a 504 plan, we can help you with that. We also do work with transition programs. VRS, so vocational rehab services, and then SSB, which is the State Services for the Blind. That's part of our client assistance program, and it is employment-based. So again, if you're having employment-related issues, that's something you can contact us to see if we can help with. Or if you need a reasonable accommodation from your training program, your college, your university, your employer, if you receive any type of Social Security benefit, those are all things we might be able to help with. And then I think we have a slide that has our client intake information. So if you do want to contact us, this is how you would do it. Our intake line is open Monday through Thursday. Monday through Friday, actually, from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. And then Monday through Thursday, it's also open from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. So if you call our intake line, our intake can talk you through your problem and see if it might be something we might be able to assist with. We do have interpreters available. And we also have fact sheets for various disability law issues on lawhelpmn.org. The link is there in the slide. Those fact sheets are not specific to disability issues. They are in that link because you can see it has the disability ad in there, but Law Help MN has fact sheets about a wide range of issues, from housing to family to immigration and to all types of issues you might be experiencing. So I encourage you to check it out. These are fact sheets that are designed for the average person to be able to read and not be super complex. So they can give you an overview of what your rights might be, and whether you might have an issue you want to contact us about. Also, our website is on that link, and you can go there to get a little bit more information. So that is an overview of what Minnesota Disability Law Center is and does. I am going to turn now to what we're here today to talk about, which is our Into Adulthood project. This is a project we've been working on for a while, and it came because we recognize that there seems to be a gap in resources for folks in the transition age, which we say is about 14 to 24. Basically that age between youth and adulthood, that age where you're transitioning and trying to find out what options might be available to you as you head into your adult life. And we wanted to compile this resource for people to know what their options might be and understand that there are more options than I think are traditionally thought of for people with disabilities. When it comes to employment, when it comes to school resources, when it comes to independent housing options, a lot of times people with disabilities might think that they don't have the option to live away from their family or on their own, and a lot of times they do. So we wanted to provide this resource that just puts everything in one place for all of these different things: health insurance, alternatives to guardianship, voting. It's pretty comprehensive, so it's a big guide, but we wanted to have everything in one place so people weren't searching all over for different topics. We have a slide here that has some links on it to various pieces of that project that we have put together so far. We've done a couple videos. We have a voting rights video. So I think we only have one video so far, but we're working on more. We had a voting rights video for that we worked hard to put out before the election this year, but is still relevant. If you are a person with a disability and interested in voting, I encourage you to check it out. We also have a couple podcasts we've done. One again on voting rights, and then also my colleague Bo put together one on racial disparities in school discipline for folks with disabilities. That is also really great, and I encourage you to check that out. We are continuously working on more resources. We're hoping to get some feedback from everyone here about what resources you want to see, what format you want to see them in, and we'll get to that at the end. But the big thing we're here to talk about today is our guide, our paper publication guide, that's also available in computer format. And we want to show that to you and how to use it. And that is what my colleague Bo is going to do. And I'm going to turn it over to them now to do that piece.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hi, everyone. I'm Bo. I use they, them pronouns. And I am a staff attorney with the same split that Kelsey has between the Disability Law Center and the Youth Law Project. So the Into Adulthood Guide, the goal of this was to help folks between the ages of 14 and 24 figure out what resources are available to them in their community. And we created an index, and some resources are referenced in multiple places because our lives don't fall into perfect buckets. Things that might help support our independent living might also look like employment. So it kind of self-references within. And then we created a resource at the end of the guide that has a lot of different agencies and their contact information, because sometimes the biggest barrier is getting a hold of the right person when you're trying to advocate for yourself and get the services that you need. And we include a tip page about how to get through that phone tree and get to your caseworker or the right specialist or the right intake line. So we included practical tips because it's not always just about knowing what's out there, but how to get access. So the first few content areas that we cover are healthcare and insurance. And there's so much here, but the biggest thing that we see, and we would love to hear if there's other experiences of folks in attendance today, is medical assistance. Most people who are accessing some sort of disability related service are getting that funded through a state funded insurance. And if you are a resident of Minnesota, you're eligible for that. And if you have a certified disability, there are income and asset limits if you're not certified with your disability. And sometimes these things change around the time of ages 19 to 21, which is within the group of folks that we're hoping to reach with this project. And there's a couple different versions of this. And then we have Minnesota Care, and we talk about how you can access different health services that way for folks that maybe aren't like super low income, but might be, somewhere between low to moderate in that. And then we have our supports for everyday life. That could look like assistive technology, especially during the pandemic. Assistive technology has been really important in terms of distance learning, but it could also look like hearing aids. It could look like a lot of different things. And with supports for everyday life, we have this huge category of waiver programs, which is something I didn't understand and I'm still learning a lot about. The idea of waivers are to be able to, as somebody with a disability, you should be able to live where you want to live and have the most independence that you possibly can. And the idea behind waivers is to help folks remain in their home or whatever living situation that they want. And there are different categories. So like brain injury, developmental disability, I could be complex medical needs. There's really a lot of different waivers, and you can access a lot of different things through that, like personal care assistance. There might be folks here today who know about PCA and have had someone who helps them with their activities of daily living every day, whether that's hygiene or grooming, all of those things, or mental health issues that someone might need a PCA for. There's a variety of, there's certain grants you can access that give you like a budget for the year. There is a waiver that is more geared towards self-determination and agency. It's the CDCS grant or waiver. And all of these are accessible through medical assistance. I don't want to like read you the guide, but there's so much there in terms of supports for everyday life to help support you remaining in the home situation that you want to be in. So then we have there's so much there. We have mental health as another section. And I feel like I'm excited. I feel like we have a lot of room to grow in Minnesota in how we view mental health disability. But it's just as valid of a type of disability that affects many Minnesotans. And so this section really focuses on how to access the right kind of case management through medical assistance or any provider that you might have, any type of insurance you may have. Oh, I see a question, and I want to be responsive because I prefer not to just talk at you the whole time. So we have a question about if a child with a disability is not getting enough waivered services, can the parent contact the Disability Law Center? So generally you start off with talking to the case manager and advocating that way. And we know that sometimes folks are not successful that way. And definitely we can either provide just advice, technical assistance, or if somebody's been denied a waiver, we might represent them in an appeal. So it depends what the issue is, but it's definitely something that would be worth reaching out to us to get some level of advice. I don't know if Kelsey, you wanted to say anything there. Yeah.
No, I think, it's never a guarantee if we can do anything. It's definitely case by case all the time. But that is exactly the type of issue that you would want to reach out to us about and see, we can look over your case and see whether there is anything that we're able to do. And like Bo said, at the very least, we would attempt to provide you with some advice and technical support so that you can help advocate for yourself.
Yeah, sometimes it just looks like giving you language to give back to the caseworker, and that will get the result. Sometimes it doesn't rise to the level of needing a legal intervention, which is always great when we can resolve things before the conflict gets to that level. Okay, I don't see any other questions at the moment. Another example of a mental health resource that you could read more about in our guide are arms workers. So I just wanted to give some tangible examples because sometimes people don't know if they haven't ever accessed any of these. And that's somebody who can help you develop the skills you need to live in community and learn about the medications you use. They can help you with your interactions with employers, landlords, all of those like day-to-day things so that you can remain independent and not let things, where conflicts might come up or misunderstandings or where it might be hard to initiate those interactions. And every section of this guide has your lists eligibility too. So it's helpful to look through and see, does this apply for me? And you might only be interested in one section of this. So the next section is housing options and supports. There's so much more under mental health, but I would keep you here forever. And I'm more interested in giving an overview of the sections and then creating space for you to ask more targeted questions. So I'm just scrolling down. There are folks who can teach you about independent living skills. And a lot of that kind of service is accessed through one of the waivers. And they're called ILS workers. Some people are eligible for a live-in PCA and can get assistance in their home. It really depends. There's a whole spectrum of ability, but that's one way that sometimes folks can avoid living in a more outside of their own independent home, is if they could have a live-in PCA. There are different guide resources on how to find housing, because sometimes that's one of the bigger barriers. Housing is an issue in Minnesota generally, and it uniquely impacts folks with disabilities. So we tried to create a section that could give folks the ability to pick it up and have a couple places to call. And then there are folks who might not be able to live on their own, and there's options for that as well, child or adult foster care. And then different ways to fund housing is included in there as well. Do you want to go over education at all, Kelsey? Because I think that's the next section. And if not, that is also okay.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I'm switching my screen over. So yeah, I'm hoping I want to be able to share the screen and show this guide at some point too, so you can see what it looks like and what we're talking about. Education, you probably, if you have a transition aged youth with a disability, already know about IEPs and different things, different school rights. You might not. If you don't, that's fine. It's not too late to try to get an IEP for your child or yourself. An IEP is an individualized education program for those who may not know that. And it does talk about that in our guide as well. Even if you are super familiar with IEPs and the IEP process, you might not be familiar with the fact that when your child reaches the age of 14, they are supposed to have transition services written into their IEP. And that includes, it can include sections on how to prepare for after graduation with education, with employment, with recreation, community participation, home living. So that's very broad. It's not just like, how do we get you onto college? It's an array of services for people of varying disabilities and varying needs and varying wants and desires. The idea is that when you turn 14, you should have as much to say as possible in your future and what you want after you graduate, and how your IEP team and your school services can help you work towards that and transition towards that. Ideally, your school district is working closely with vocational rehab so that you also have a VRS counselor that works with the school and can help you decide on your employment goals, your path to get there, maybe find you some pre-employment services, pre-employment transition services, PREETs they're called, and can connect you with that. Not everyone with a disability qualifies for an IEP, and we also go over that. Sometimes disabilities don't rise to the level of an IEP, but that doesn't mean you don't need accommodations. So we also talk about what's called a 504 plan, which is, if you're not familiar, just kind of the ADA version of an IEP that just makes sure you're not being discriminated against for your disability. So we talk a bit about that as well. And really the key takeaway is just to make sure that when you or your child turns 14, that transition services are being accounted for in their IEP as soon as possible and as thoroughly as possible, so that, you know, when it's time for them to exit their transition program at the age of 21, because that is how late transition services go, that they already have skills in place and a plan in place, so you know what's coming next, be it community employment, be it you know, supported workshop employment, be it living with family, living on your own, living in a group home, just taking into account all of your goals and making sure that those are understood and respected and worked towards. So our guide talks a little bit about how to do that as well. And that is also something that if you're having issues with and don't feel like are being taken into account, that is something you could contact us about and see if there's anything we might be able to do to help you access the transition services that you need. We also do talk a little bit about post-secondary accommodations, so colleges, training programs, things like that, where IEPs, individualized education programs, no longer exist, but you do still have disability access rights through the ADA, Section 504 plans, accommodations, just, you know, things to help you get the work, employment, school resources that you need. So you have less rights when you graduate your high school transition program. There's not as much, there aren't as many services that you might be entitled to, but you do still have protections and rights, and you still are entitled to accommodations. And so that's something we also are able to help with. If you find that you are struggling to access your post-secondary program because they are refusing you a necessary accommodation, that's something I would encourage you to reach out to us about. And it does talk a little bit about that in our guide as well. You want to talk about work, Bo?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I see that we do have another Facebook question.
Ooh,
And the question is, can a 17-year-old be involved in IEPT meetings about transition services? The answer is yes. Yes, actually, when you are that transition age, if you are able and willing to be involved in your IEPT meetings, absolutely, please do. It is definitely allowed and definitely encouraged. We want you as the person with the disability to have as much say and agency over your life and your decisions as possible, and you are entitled to attend those team meetings. So yes, please do. If you are able and want to, attend your meetings. A 17-year-old definitely can attend those transition services and should, to make sure that you're being heard about what you want and need for your future. Okay, Bo?
Absolutely. Work. So what are your work options? Oh, there's another question. Our guide and the counselors, right? The vocational rehabilitation counselors or the transition counselors at schools. Every school has 2 counselors, I believe.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't see the question is, where can someone get more information about what options are available regarding transition services?
Yeah, and every school has 2 people that work there who should be able to answer those questions, the vocational rehabilitation service counselors. And they should work with anybody who has a disability and has an IEP on talking about what different things, like whether it's job shadow, anything else employment related or post-secondary, whether the person is looking at different educational programs or trade schools, they should be working with you on that. And so when it comes to job options for young adults with disabilities, you have the right to work in the community alongside people with and without disabilities and earn at least minimum wage. You could choose to work only with people with disabilities, and that can result in earning less than minimum wage. And we have a whole page that talks about that. And if you choose to do something like that, they're called sheltered work. You should be given the choice once a year to change your mind and decide to work in community earning minimum wage or more. And these are conversations that are being had in each state about whether that's acceptable or not. But your case manager or VRS counselor can talk to you about more about those options. So yeah, the VRS counselor is the go-to for somebody who's in school. They can help you get career counseling, they can get you job training, they can help you find your first job or a new job if you're not liking the first job that you've gotten. And if you have a medical assistance waiver, you might be able to get some services that way through your waiver.
But also, just another plug, if you're not happy with the services you're getting and you're not having any luck getting through your counselor, or you aren't having luck getting transition services, again, that's something you can reach out to us and we can see if there might be something we can do to help you advocate for those resources. I think sorry, but I just want to cut because I think we're about to switch and start sharing the actual guide. And
Yeah.
so people can actually see the guide. Just so everyone's aware that the screen is changing.
Yes. So I was just kind of going over this section. And then we just touched briefly on the vocational rehabilitation counselors that are available in school. Other options are extended employment. So if you were encountering significant barriers to keeping a job or moving forward, you could get some long-term assistance with that. And that would frequently look like through a case manager or, again, that vocational rehabilitation counselor. But I think these are the kinds of things that you might not know to ask about. So that's why we named that there. And then I mentioned that you can be accessing this through vocational rehabilitation, or you could be accessing employment help through a medical assistance waiver. And so that looks like on the next page, employment exploration services. So that's figuring out like, what are my strengths? What am I good at? Sometimes people don't know where to start. That's just like common for anybody who is going into adulthood. Sometimes it's getting stuck at the point of like finding the job. And then it's the keeping of the job. There are day training and habilitation programs. So that's like an opportunity to practice some of the skills. This is more geared towards folks with developmental disabilities or related conditions who are on the developmental disability waiver. And then there are pre-vocational services. So that's before you get a job. What are some of the general skills that I need to practice before I can get and keep a job? What kind of communication skills do I need at my job? And how do I make sure that I have the transportation that I need? And what's it like to show up every day if it's a every day, 5 day a week kind of job? Practicing that. And that is all through different waivers that we talked about earlier, which is why the guide references itself. And then on the next page, we talk about who do you talk to for help with getting or keeping a job. There's this option called individual placement and support. They work with folks. This is more of that mental health, serious mental illness, disability, folks who want to be working in the community. This usually requires being referred by a mental health provider. So this is something that you could bring up if you have a therapist or a psychiatrist. Anybody who's helping you with your mental health could get you connected with this kind of program to help you overcome any barriers to employment or get the supports that you need. And then we have career force centers. And these are folks that are going to work really intensely with you on the logistics of getting a job. Where do you go to look for job listings? What does my resume need to look like? How can I make it stand out? How do I write a cover letter? What kinds of questions can I expect? Practicing your interview skills. And we provide where you can go to find your local career force office. And a really big thing that we see are folks get a job and they might need an accommodation so that they can keep that job based on their disability. There's some requirements, like you have to work somewhere that has at least 15 or more other people working there to be able to request a reasonable accommodation. But this could look like you might need a chair at the cash register because you can't stand for a prolonged amount of time, or in certain amounts of breaks or types of breaks that are otherwise not provided for employees. And we provide some contact information there, but this would be another situation where if you get denied a reasonable accommodation or you feel like you're about to lose your job because of something that's related to your disability, that you could reach out to us and we could work with you on that. If you've already exhausted trying to work with your vocational rehabilitation counselor. Oh, it looks like we might have some. Okay, so folks wanted to hear some accommodations someone could ask for. I mean, one specific to the pandemic was somebody who had a disability that put them at risk for COVID, and the ability to take like a leave of absence was that specific to like the pandemic. Like I said earlier, somebody might need to be able to sit otherwise at like a cash register where they might be at, the expectation might be to stand. I'm trying to think of other cases that I've handled. Kelsey, can you think of additional?
It's really, there's not a definitive list.
Yeah.
A reasonable accommodation is just anything that's not unreasonable for the employer. So basically anything that's going to help you be able to do your job that isn't a huge burden for the employer to provide. So that's case by case. It depends on the job. It depends on your disability. It might be that you have a flexible schedule because you have certain appointments or things that you can't make it at 8 every morning, and you need the flexibility to come in at a different time. It might be more frequent breaks. It might be assistive technology. Maybe if you have a job where you need to write a lot, but you don't have the motor skills to do that, it might be assistive technology to help you do whatever written work you need to do. It really, it's so varied. It's so wide and varied. If you think that you could do a job if you just had a little bit of help, then you might have an accommodation waiting for you, and you can get creative with it. So it's there's not a set definitive list. It's really just about giving you the tools that you need to be able to do a job that really you're capable of.
Right. It could be having different lighting in your office because of a sensory issue. There's so many different things, or being on the first floor for accessibility reasons. If you have a wheelchair, you might be able to request that kind of accommodation. So whether it's a physical or mental disability. There's so many things you could ask for. The next part of our guide talks about sub-minimum wage again. So earlier when I was talking about whether you could be paid less than minimum wage, they can only do that if the disability affects your job performance for the specific task you are doing. So a person whose hand is clenched and has trouble picking up pieces to assemble a part. But if you have a complaint or like you have any questions about whether you're being paid what you should be paid, you can contact the Department of Labor or us. We will also assist if you think that you are not being paid appropriately. We can help walk through an analysis of whether they are following the laws regarding when it's appropriate to pay someone sub-minimum wage. And then we have a whole category of there are folks who receive a government benefit like Social Security disability or supplemental Social Security income, SSI, SSDI, and want to make enough money on their own to either get off of that benefit. And then there are options where people want to retain their benefit. And so it gets really complicated, and so it's frequent that folks will need some advice around these kinds of things. But the first program is Ticket to Work. That is one with that goes to page 44, but that is a program where you can work with Social Security to kind of support you through that process of entering the workforce. Yes. It helps you kind of assess what your needs would be around that. They can support you in preparing for work and in the keeping of the job, but you have to be receiving benefits to participate in that program. And then there's another, this is addressing that whole question of like, can you work and get benefits? Because those are really difficult questions that people with disabilities are facing. So there's the student earned income exception, where you can earn a certain amount of money and Social Security doesn't count it as income. And that changes each year. And so you need to be getting SSI and be under age 22 and be in school. And that is something that we can assist with if you were to encounter a conflict with Social Security around that. And then there are other options. So there's an earned income exception, PATH plans, impairment related work expenses. All of these require that you are on disability related benefits, and we're happy to help answer any of those questions that folks have around that. If we could go back to one of the big barriers that folks might have with a job is transportation. And so we made a section that helps folks troubleshoot that, because sometimes we don't live near where we're able to get work. And there are a variety of services through counties or vocational rehabilitation where you can explore opportunities like anywhere from getting your own car to ride sharing, light rail. And if you're on a waiver through the county, you might even be able to get additional services around transportation through that. And then I'll pass back to Kelsey for money and financial help. And yeah, please feel free to post any other questions. We've had some really great questions so far.
So really, the whole point of the money and financial help section is just to let you be aware of different resources there are to help you manage your money. So maybe you are a person with a disability that hasn't had much experience managing your own money, but you would like to be as independent as possible. And so this provides some resources about how to manage that money, budget, different resources that might be available to you. We have some links there for some financial counseling, things to check like your credit, open bank accounts, things like that. But we also talk about financial assistance. So if you maybe aren't able to be fully employed or employed in a way where you can support yourself, this is the section where it talks about what other resources there might be, like Social Security, and how to go about applying for that and getting more information about that. We also talk about a few different Minnesota specific government benefits like supplemental aid, housing assistance, general assistance. This is really just where it talks about benefits that might be available to you outside of your disability specific benefits, such as your waiver or your medical assistance. These are general assistance type programs if you are trying to live on your own, or maybe even not on your own with other people, but you're trying to manage your money and support yourself. This is the section where you would learn about that. We also again talk about some of the things we already discussed in the work section, like the ticket to work and how working might affect your Social Security benefits, or it might not, and how to find out information about that. Lots of focus on Social Security there, because that does affect a lot of people that have disabilities, obviously get Social Security disability insurance. So we do talk a lot about Social Security and how some of these different programs affect Social Security, how to manage your Social Security payments. We also talk a bit about representative payees. So if you are unable to manage your own money, representative payee is someone who would either you could choose or be appointed. Often it's a family member or close friend, but there are actually professional representative payees too, if you don't have someone close to you that you trust, that can manage your money and get your Social Security benefits and make sure that it is being used to support you. If you are someone who has a representative payee and you feel like they're mismanaging your money, that is also something that we can assist with. So if you are someone who gets Social Security and has a rep payee and you feel like your money is being mismanaged, that is something we'd encourage you to reach out and contact us, and we can look into. We also talk about alternatives to guardianship. A lot of people think, and this is a bit of overlap with the financial section and the guardianship section, with conservatorship, different types of accounts. A lot of folks with disabilities, and especially developmental disabilities, it might just be assumed that when they turn 18, they'll have a guardian, and that doesn't necessarily need to be the case. We, as an organization, like to advocate for people to have as much agency over their lives as possible. So if you don't want a guardian or want to be able to actually be your own guardian and make your own decisions, but have help managing your affairs, this guide talks about ways to do that, ways to get, help managing your financial affairs, supported decision making, that can help you think through the big decisions you need to make about healthcare, things like that, without actually taking away your legal right to make those decisions for yourself. So this guide also talks about, we want to make you aware that there are alternatives to guardianship when you turn 18. There are ways to support you and make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, but ensure that you also have the most agency over your life as possible. I'm not going to go through every single thing in the guide, because I know I know we're getting into some time we wanted to save for questions. Maybe I'll let Bo talk about voting real quick.
Happy to talk about voting. Yeah, so you have a right to vote and be a part of elections when you turn 18. And polling needs to be accessible to you, which was a lot of the focus of that voting rights video that we made and the podcast episode that we recorded in the fall. So this part of the guide just walks through registering to vote and ways to do that. And so you just have to be 18 and have been a resident for 20 days in Minnesota. Otherwise, there are like restrictions that apply to everyone, which you can't be serving a felony sentence, or if a court has specifically ordered that you can't vote, but otherwise you can. And sometimes people don't know that. Can you vote if you have a guardian is a very common question. Absolutely. Unless the court has specifically ordered otherwise, you have that right. And we do monitoring every election beforehand to make sure that polling places are going to be accessible to folks with all disabilities. And you should be able to do that by absentee ballot. You should be able to have your ballot be secret. No one should know. Nobody, just because you have a disability doesn't mean people get to know how you're voting. You can have assistants filling out your ballot, and the person who helps you do that shouldn't influence or try to influence how you're voting. So yeah, that's kind of a quick overview of voting, which is a very important topic. And then we have, we talked about transportation in relation.
Sorry, Bo.
Yeah.
We did have a quick question about, for people who want to do absentee ballot, can they reach out to us for assistance to sign up for absentee voting? So you don't need to, honestly. There are so many other resources that can help you with that. Secretary of State, there's a lot of different organizations that help with that. I would encourage you to check out our video that we made that tells you exactly how to request that that absentee ballot. And also our podcast talks about different disability rights. There are a ton of resources out there actually to help you request that absentee ballot. That's probably not something we would necessarily help with, but if you are having trouble getting it, or feel like you're being discriminated against, or not being able to vote for some reason, that is more something you would want to reach out to us about. You can certainly reach out with questions if you just don't know what your rights are, or along those lines. And I don't know if did we make these materials available so that people have the link to the video? That's a really good place to look for how to request your absentee ballot. It does like a step-by-step of what you would need to do. But that information is all on the Secretary of State website as well.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, is whenever I've wanted to find out anything about ballot related things, I have Googled Secretary of State and done that. But if you need assistance beyond that, definitely working with any case manager or any service that you might be receiving to help access that information.
We also had a question about, should polling places be accessible for people who use wheelchairs? The answer is absolutely yes.
Yes.
The second answer is, unfortunately, not all of them are. And a big reason for that is a lot of them are in churches, and churches do not have the same ADA requirements as a lot of other buildings. The workaround for that is that there are a lot of other ways to vote. So like curbside voting, for instance, curbside voting should be an option at every polling place. If you can't make it into the building, then they should be able to bring a ballot out to you to have you fill it out. There are ways to make every place accessible, or there should be ways to make every place accessible. And if there are not, when it comes to voting time, there's actually a hotline you can call and say, I can't vote here. There's there's something wrong with the disability access. Like Bo mentioned, we do a lot of monitoring of polling locations every year to try to check on whether they are accessible or not. So most of them are, and they should be wheelchair accessible, but if for some reason they are not, there are still other ways to make sure you're able to vote right then and there, day of.
Perfect. So I love that we had questions about voting. The last, is it the last? It's not like, it might be the last section, but then we have kind of these extra resources at the end of the guide. The last section is about transportation, which we touched briefly on when we were talking about employment and how you might need support getting transportation to your job. But you might need transportation for anything, getting to your doctor, seeing your friends, being a part of the community is really important. And figuring out bus or light rail can be a challenge for anyone. And if you're in the metro area, so the Twin Cities, there is Metro Transit and Metro Mobility. And you can contact them. We provide the contact information for that. And then in Greater Minnesota, you're going to have to work with your local public transportation system to see what kinds of transit is available. Sometimes it depends county to county how, it shouldn't be that way, but sometimes it depends county to county what the accessibility looks like. And then sometimes people want to know what other options they have beyond public transportation. So we put in ride sharing, we put in taxis, carpooling, and there are different resources that can help you explore those options. And then sometimes the cost of public transportation or transportation generally is a barrier for folks. And we include some resources related to how to pay for transportation. Medical assistance and community-based waivers can help with that. They can help you learn how to use it. And in some situations, they might also cover transportation costs to and from work, not necessarily for things beyond work, but in that. And it looks like, what about transportation to public schools? Which
As
is
a student, that's something more that's probably going to be covered in your IEP and should be addressed in your IEP. So if you need special transportation to your school, that's more an education service. You can get that written into your IEP. If you live in your district, the school should be providing it anyway, but I know sometimes people have special needs for their transportation, and that is something that can definitely be provided for in your IEP so that you get the transportation that you need. It might be door-to-door, person-to-person handoffs, accessibility, wheelchair accessibility, whatever you might need. That's something that's going to be addressed more in your education plan.
Thank you, Kelsey. We had talked about this waiver earlier, but the CDCS is a more person-centered type of waiver, and that gives you some flexibility to spend some of the budget that you get on a waiver, if you're on a waiver, on the transportation that best meets your needs. And that could include shopping for essential items or participating in some sort of community group or a hobby. And then we've got, like we mentioned before, medical assistance. There's non-emergency medical transportation. So you might be able to use medical assistance to get to your appointments. And then with vocational rehabilitation services, they can work with you to help identify the options there are to get a car and use public transit. So that's kind of more like when you're in school. And then we have this robust list of resources of different agencies that can support you that range from mental health related disabilities, physical disabilities, and the contact information for many of them. And then we give tips for how to get the right person on the phone. It's important to know your case number. There's just like, there's so much. Knowing your caseworker's name, knowing who their supervisor is. That's a lot of just like practical advice. So we just had the question if there are waivers available to help with transportation costs. And so, yeah, that was what the last part of going over transportation, that the CDCS waiver is one option to use some of that budget to access transportation that meets your needs. And then you might be able to use a service under your waiver, like an independent skills staff member can help you learn how to use that. So there are some ways possibly to use your waiver, but it won't necessarily in every instance, I don't think, cover that. Is that accurate, Kelsey?
Yeah, it depends. Like every question
I know.
we get, I think it just depends. It's circumstantial, but yes, waivers can cover transportation costs depending on what it's to and from. So for instance, to a medical appointment, there's a good chance, yes. If you're just going out to the movies, probably not. Things like going to work, that's something that your voc rehab might be able to help with. So there's a variety of ways and resources to pay for your transportation. It just depends on what it is you're trying to get to and what programs you are enrolled in. And again, that's kind of the purpose of this guide, is just to let you know what programs are available. It's not 100% comprehensive, but we tried to include as much as we could that we thought might be relevant so that you know what services are available and how to at least get to the person that can tell you how to access them. And so transportation costs, yes, they might be covered. And that's why we have it in a few different sections in this guide, so that, you know, depending on what you need your transportation for, if it's medical, if it's work, if it's school, then you have there who you need to contact to try to get it covered.
And there was a question about how to access the guide. Okay, so Christina's going to screen share. And additionally, the link has been shared in the Facebook chat, and you should be able to access the guide from our website. The last thing I wanted to add that was at the beginning of the guide was just that sometimes people have questions about their status, like their immigration status. So like whether somebody in your family identifies as undocumented or not, or you're not sure about the immigration status. Even if you're unsure, you might still be eligible for certain benefits in the guide. And so we just like to reassure folks that like our services are confidential, and immigration status doesn't get reported by us to anyone who comes to ask us for advice. So if that's something you're not sure about for a family member or yourself, we just don't want that to be a barrier. Sometimes people think we work for like the state or the government, and we are not a part of the government. So just wanted to put that out there. And now we would welcome, go ahead.
I just want to point out that Christina's sharing our website on the screen, and that's mylegalaid.org. I believe that this is going to be linked in the comments on Facebook as well. And this is where you would go to download a copy of this guide. It's mylegalaid.org. There should be some things you can click on to get to the disability law website and the transition youth website, or if you can see up in the actual address, it's our work/program/transition youth program. It's on there, but we're also going to link it in the Facebook because that might be easiest for everyone here, I think. It is not yet. So we had a question about whether this guide is available in multiple languages. It is not yet. We are working on getting it translated. Christina, can you possibly remind me which languages we're translating it into?
We're translating it into Hmong, Spanish, and Somali.
Yeah, so hopefully soon. We just now got this final copy out. We've been doing a lot of edits. So that is, I think, our next step. And we are hoping to get that done as soon as possible so that it's available to the broader community. But yes, we will be having it translated. And it will also be updated at least every year, possibly more. So one thing I would also encourage you is, these programs change constantly, and we try to keep it as updated as possible. But always the best practice is to reach out to whatever program and just check. We try to include links to websites. We try to include phone numbers for all of these different resources. If we know of changes, we try to update them as soon as possible. But a lot of these programs are in flux. And so this guide is evolving all the time. And we also just are looking for feedback from the community of what people are hoping to see, what resources you want, what topics do you want to know about? What things do you need? How do you want them delivered? Is it a guide like this? Is it a video? Is it a podcast? How do you get your information? We're really just looking for feedback because we want our information and materials to be as accessible as possible and as relevant as possible to the community that we want to be able to use them. So I guess actually, if anyone has that feedback now and wants to comment on the live or send a message, I think we're going to solicit feedback afterwards too. But if you have things that you want to know about, that you need information on for your yourself or your transition aged family member, let us know what it is you're looking for. What information do you need that you feel like you're not getting? And how do you wish that you could get that information delivered to you?
All right, and so it looks like it's great that we've been having questions throughout the live stream. And so maybe we could give it a few more seconds to see if anybody else viewing the live stream has any other questions for Bo or Kelsey. All right, if there are no more other questions right now, Bo, Kelsey, is there any other last minute things that you would like folks to know?
I would just add, like I said, we are continuously putting out more resources. We are trying to get more videos, more podcasts in the future. So check back, we are trying to create more resources. But again, we're also trying to create relevant resources. So if anyone thinks of anything that you just think, wow, I really wish I had that, or actually the way you're delivering this information doesn't work for me, could you do it a different way? we would really welcome that feedback so that we make sure the things that we are creating are things that can actually be used. So.
Great.
Oh, and there's our contact information. So feel free to email either one of us. We're happy to answer your questions individually if you didn't get a chance to ask them today, or if you think of them later as they come up. Shoot us an email. Happy to get your feedback, questions, concerns, whatever it is. So.
Yeah. And I guess just a shameless plug that if you have a compelling story about your experience with disability and wanted to be involved and into adulthood in some capacity with our podcast or in a video, let us know. We would love to talk to you.
Yes, we're trying to focus our videos and our podcasts as much on youth voice as much as possible. So if you are someone or know someone with a disability that thinks that you want to share your experience with transition, resources, school, work, whatever, we want the focus to be on you, not us. So yeah, let us know if you might want to share your story and be part of a resource for the broader community.
Great. Thank you, Bo and Kelsey, so much for sharing about Minnesota Disability Law Center and the guide. That was super helpful and super informational. So again, just thank you everyone for tuning in. And I really hope that you all learned something new that you found helpful. I want to give a huge thank you to the Minnesota Disability Law Center and the ASL interpreters for being with us tonight and making this live stream event possible. Just another reminder that the live stream will be available even after this live stream has ended on SAWV for anyone who may have missed to tune in live with us, that they can watch this at any time. And so with that being said, this is the end of the live stream event. Thank you everyone again so much and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.